Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Trending Echoes, happening right here in the beautiful Expo City in Dubai. Today, we've got a very interesting guest to talk about the theme of COP28 happening, which is just energy and just transformations. We are joined right here in the studio by Ben Davis, an economist at Trends Research and Advisory. Ben, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, Omar.
Great
Good
to have you
be
here.
Yeah.
So COP28, first of all, give me your thoughts, overall thoughts.
Well, this is my first visit to Expo City, so it's blowing me away. I mean, it's just amazing how they've managed to weave energy-efficient technologies into the buildings. I was looking just outside here as I was wandering around. There's PV in the shading, PV everywhere,
Right.
And it's just such a good place to be. There's definitely an awesome vibe. Everybody wants to get stuff done here. So from that perspective, I think, very positive about what's going to come out of COP28.
Now, you're an expert in a couple of different fields. One of them that we want to talk to you about, which is the actual theme today at COP28, just transformation, just energy transitions. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Share your thoughts on what do you think the current situation is, and in the future, what can we expect?
Well, it's a very important issue for where I come from, but I've worked in multiple countries. I've always found the problems that you have in emerging markets to be the most fascinating to try and solve. And one of the biggest issues that I've fallen into over the course of my career has been how do you get energy, which is a foundational input in a modern economy, into societies in places like Africa.
How do you?
It's basically stumping policymakers at COP28, and it's been stumping them for decades, if not centuries. I mean, the biggest problems that you have in Africa is, its huge size. Interestingly, relatively low population density. In order to get energy from where it can be produced to where it's being consumed has always been a problem. In the old days when it was fossil fuels, the coal beds that used to power electricity for South Africa were 300-400 kilometers away from where the economic activity was going on, which was the gold mines in Johannesburg. So originally everybody used to rail freight that coal into Johannesburg. And now in a just energy transition, it's estimated that South Africa, and you can use it as a rule of thumb for most other markets in Africa, probably going to spend in the region of $12 to $15 billion just getting an electron from where it can be produced from a renewable perspective to where people are living and need the electrons. That's before you put in a solar park or build a hydro plant or link transitional energy solutions like nuclear or gas to the grid. So that's the first issue that you have. The second one is Africa has a huge problem when it comes to access to finance. It just blows the economics of renewable energy out the water when it comes to an individual looking to essentially mitigate their carbon footprint. So it's a very difficult issue to rationally make for somebody who's struggling to make ends meet at the moment. I mean, Africa is a tough place for everybody. So as a result, I mean, even countries that are essentially renewable energy generators of electricity, like Kenya or Ethiopia or whatever it is, still battle with this issue that they've got to transmit that electricity to somebody, and then that person has got to switch from their current power solution to something that is more sustainable. That's a nice problem to grapple with.
Right.
I think what's going on around the just transition and the conversations that are going on at COP is that everybody they talk about big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $4 trillion, which, I mean, is 4% of the total market cap of the world, needs to be invested in renewable energy, energy efficiency, a whole lot of different technologies. It's got to be distributed relatively evenly across the world. So that implies a whole lot of emerging markets. But the numbers, I think, belie the issue that ultimately what you've got to think about is how do you get somebody to buy clean energy at a capital cost of $10,000? So how do you break it into those component parts and then allow yourself to scale it so that it becomes a large manufacturing concern that you're potentially generating power for, or it's feeding into a national grid that could potentially supply 25% of the population with the power that they need. So those are the types of issues that you've got to sort of play with, and each country has its own unique set of constraints.
Right. Now, interesting, you were talking about scaling, and you have a background of startups, supporting startups.
Yeah.
How does that all relate to climate change, sustainability, and what's your involvement in it exactly? And I'm asking this because as an entrepreneur, I'm very curious to, see your perspective on it.
I was basically a startup gun for hire for large corporates. I worked in a large consulting firm in Africa, and that consulting firm identified very early on that one of the big problems that Africa has is a lack of skills. So I don't know whether you know this, but Africa, risk-adjusted rate of returns for businesses in Africa are twice what they are anywhere else.
Right.
Okay, so there's definitely a business case and an investment case to invest in Africa. The key thing is, how do you access the skills? And if you're a large corporate that's designed around traditional banking or telecoms, how do you get into adjacent spaces? How do you build mobile banks? How do you finance renewable energy? How do you bank people that you've never banked before? How do you participate in urban finance opportunities that are existing? So there are a whole lot of opportunities that open up in Africa, and the key thing is, how do you get the right skills around that particular problem to solve that? So I was lucky in that I got to play across a whole lot of different spaces. I worked with major telcos in Africa to roll out their mobile money solutions, which are now essentially the biggest banks in Africa. Worked on all the associated other financial services that exist around that. So how do you offer credit to somebody who's never taken out credit?
Right.
How do you deliver it to them in a way that they understand?
And not default.
Well, and do you punish them for defaulting?
Right.
So the key problem is that you can't lend $10 to somebody. Again, exactly. It comes down to finance. So how do you do that? Well, then you've got to find that ecosystem. So that's what we've been doing, is that we've been working with different partners to figure out how do you scale that solution?
Well, and that's the question I have in mind, is what becomes the plan B, for the lack of better words? We understand PV, solar panels will work as long as we've got sun, right? What happens on a cloudy day or a cloudy week? What becomes a plan B?
So the nice thing about
batteries,
schools, what
happens when they're drained out?
Yeah, exactly. So the nice thing about South Africa, and I think here, is that sun's pretty much guaranteed. So
sure.
So you and kids go to school not at night, but they go during the day.
During the daytime.
So
that makes sense.
So that's quite cool. So you can at least eliminate the blackouts during class times.
Sure.
For the vast majority of the time that they have available.
Sure.
Depending on whether you what they call overspec the solar panels, you could guarantee power even on cloudy days because the load that's needed is relatively low. So that's the first point. But the next question that comes on, okay, so now you've designed for 99% uptime. Kids go on holidays. Yeah. So what do you do with that excess energy?
Sure.
So then it becomes
absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you deal with the?
Can you profit from it?
To give you an idea, in the UAE, it's very difficult to have a market to feed power back into the grid if you're a small producer of electricity.
Sure.
You can do own generation.
Right.
But the regulatory environment is not necessarily there. In South Africa, that regulatory environment is determined at a town level.
Okay, understood.
So each town has a different regulatory environment for how you can sell energy. In these models, it becomes quite tricky to create something that is super scalable.
Sure.
For something as small as those individual consumers that you're hoping to be able to fill the gaps on the power that you've now installed, for example, on a school. But you could apply that to anything. Everybody gets transported around by a 20-seater Toyota bus.
Sure.
It's a diesel at the moment. Let's convert it to electric. So one of the professors at the moment is retrofitting electric buses.
Very cool.
And he's getting such a cool response from taxi drivers who are going, this thing accelerates better off the red light, which is what I definitely want to do because I'm a pretty dangerous driver and I want to get my next fare. It's more reliable. Mm-hmm. Instead of selling prepaid electricity to a household, How about putting a bank of EV chargers outside the school
Right.
and charging public transport?
Sure.
And that's a predictable business model because you know that guy's going to come back if you've got the right price.
Right.
Do that for local communities.
Has any of this been applied yet?
So we're working on it at the moment, actually. Yeah. So this is.
And how far along are you in this?
So
because
we've got our
very interesting to see such a model actually come into play, but most importantly, to actually work.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we're piloting at the moment. We've got the biggest issue that we had in the past was how do we access financing? And we struggled with that. We were like, so we're actually going to have to become a financing business. And then there were all these government procurement rules. So how do you deal with the related party issues? How can you responsibly advise a school to buy your financing solution? And what we worked out is that we can't actually do that. We've actually just got to be the advisor. So advising a school governing body on how to do this right and how to do this responsibly, and making sure that it's scalable. So I can do this for 20,000 schools if I had the opportunity to. The financer was really important. We started initially getting funding from Stellenbosch University for the first school. So they've put in their first PV, and then we're hoping that the EV taxis will start coming through at the moment. The other thing that's really important is that stuff breaks. How do you deal with the maintenance contract? So it's about building an ecosystem of local guys who can go out and fix stuff. So they've worked with building an ecosystem of small business owners who can go and make sure that when a system goes down, somebody's there to go and fix it. In the first quarter of next year, we've got our first 10 pilot schools that are going to be doing that. And then
that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool. I'm super impressed with the guys. And it doesn't necessarily need to be schools. It could be anything. And that's, I think, the exciting thing is once you approach it from a whole of economy or ecosystem perspective, you suddenly realize that there are all these little adjacencies that actually create huge value for the economy.
In conclusion, before we wrap things up, obviously I want to give a big thanks to Trends for providing this platform. Speaking of platform, to any of the viewers, watchers, any final words, any message you want to put out there?
Yeah, I think the harder the problem, the more impactful is when it's solved. And also, the more fun you have in trying to solve it. Don't be scared of big problems.
Right.
That's the most exciting thing to try and solve.
Well, it seems like you're taking on a handful of them. We wish you all the best as you embark on this amazing journey of climate change improvement, sustainability, and all this amazing stuff. And would love to know the progress in the future. So we'll probably get you back on the show sometime, discuss the progress. We'd love to see all these schools hooked up to all the PVs and, being self-sufficient with generating its own energy. Yeah. And once again, thanks for being here on the show.
Thanks very much, Omar. It's a privilege.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was another episode of Trending Echoes, and we were here with the amazing Ben Davis. Once again, we wish you all the luck. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.